All right, let's reconvene this meeting. Get rolling here. Mike, we'll hand it over to you under the manager's report to talk facilities.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I am very happy to be here this evening to bring you an update and provide some additional information as staff works to advance the facility replacement and sustainability plan. Tonight's presentation and discussion will focus on two primary topics. Those include the preliminary exterior elevations of the new facility, as well as environmental attributes of the building and the site. Before I go into the presentation, I want to acknowledge and introduce representatives of the design and construction firms. As a reminder, Council approved contracts in December for the village to work with these firms on the design and construction of the facility. So with us this evening, we have Nicole McElroy from Leopardo Companies, and Brian Mead and David Yandel from FGM Architects. Very happy with this team. We've been working really well together as this project has advanced. I'm thrilled to share that information with you this evening. My presentation, in addition to these two topics, will provide a little bit of background information up front. After we get through the presentation of the preliminary exterior elevations, I'll pause and allow opportunities for comments and questions from council members on that particular topic before we continue. So the issue that we've been discussing for quite some time is that the buildings that the village occupies, the 42-year-old police station and 90-plus-year-old village hall, are below average condition and have a significant number of challenges in terms of how we serve customers, how we perform basic functions, and just the overall maintenance of these facilities. In short, they're both in need of replacement. The plan that has been developed and approved by the Village Council calls for the construction of a new police station, village hall building that would also accommodate District 58 administrative offices and allow for sale of a portion of the property to allow for an apartment development. And that development would help pay for portions of the construction cost. All of this construction activity will take place on the existing Civic Center site that we are currently on. Construction is scheduled to occur between 2022 and 2024 with multiple phases of construction occurring. The cost range will be between $48 and $54 million. And the village has the revenue sources in place to fund this project that includes cash on hand and a bond issuance for which council approved a parameters ordinance last month as well. This slide highlights the schedule showing major milestones for the upcoming through the third quarter of 2022. You can see highlighted here the item that we're discussing this evening. There are more as we go through the remainder of this quarter, including the TIF public hearing, the completion of schematic design, and public meetings, including a neighborhood meeting and the Plan Commission public hearing. I thought this slide would be helpful to reference the flight analogy. It's something the council is familiar with and that we typically discuss during our long-range planning process, but it's a valuable tool to think about where we are right now as we're going through the design process. So you can think about this portion of design work as being at about the 20 to 30,000 foot level of our flight analogy. And so the direction and the comments that we're seeking tonight should be considered, at about that altitude level. As we get closer to construction, toward the third quarter of this year, obviously we'll move in a progression that makes more and more detail level decisions as we, in construction, right on that runway level of the flight analogy. So again, tonight we are seeking general direction on the exterior building elevations that you'll be seeing in just a minute. I will remind council there were a list of desired attributes that were discussed when the facility replacement sustainability plan was presented and discussed in mid-November. So this list appeared on the whiteboard in the committee room and it was reviewed and approved by the village council as the desired attributes that the village working with the architect, should pursue in preparing the exterior elevations. I won't read through every single one of them, but certainly the architect was very aware of these attributes, and they have been incorporated into the designs that you'll be seeing. So what you will see are two options. One option that shows a flat roof building, the other option showing sloped roof. You'll see 4 perspectives for each of those options from different vantage points around the building. As a reminder, this is the site plan. It was also discussed and approved in November. It has the arrows you can see around the building showing where those perspective and viewpoints will be shown as you see each of the elevations. So the first one will be this arrow in the southeast, right here, and then we'll make our way around the building. Ground level views from the southwest, from the northwest, and then a bird's eye view from the southwest. All right, so here is the first elevation showing the view from the southeast for the flat roof option building. You can see features the use of brick and limestone along the facade, windows in prominent locations to designate the points of entrance into the building. You can see this would be the entrance to Village Hall portion of the facility. There'd be a separate lobby on the east side of the building for the entrance to the police station lobby. Meeting rooms and council chambers would be toward the southern end of the building here. Go to the next picture, now showing from the southwest. This would be a pedestrian corridor along the west side of the building. From the northwest, so this is looking just on the other side of the railroad tracks, back toward the building. We would establish a plaza area in the northwest corner, and it has a little bit of a roof overhang here on the northwest corner of the building. And then here's that bird's eye view from the southwest. Again, all 4 images for the flat roof option. All right, then moving on, now you're going to see essentially the same building configuration, but now with the sloped roof. So the same perspective on each image. But you can see the roof shape and form changes quite dramatically, now showing a sloped roof as opposed to the flat roof option you were seeing previously. Here's the image from the southwest. I should point out all of these visuals are available online. If anybody would like to click on the link to these slides and take a look, they can do so at their convenience. From the northwest, and then the bird's eye view from the southwest, showing the sloped roof option of the building. It's at this point, again, I'll remind council, we're seeking general direction, either a preference for either of the 2 options or general commentary that you would like to offer on any of the aesthetic features of the building. The architects are certainly here to assist with any questions.
Taking notes?
Especially those of a more technical nature. And be happy to entertain any questions or comments you have at this time.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody want to jump in and start? Leslie?
Yep. I just have a couple comments and one question. So I think in general, my preference is the flat roof, both for aesthetics, but also because when you start to get down, it's hard for me to separate the elevation and the environmental aspects, because if we decide to go with a few more of those environmental aspects, the flat roof is going to give us more room for those solar arrays. So my preference would be the flat roof so that we have more flexibility there. I also just like the way it looks better. But my other question is there a major difference between maintenance when you're talking about a sloped roof versus a flat roof? Is that something that we should be taking into consideration, I guess, is my question.
Brian or David, do you want to come up to the microphone?
Hi, good evening. So I think either one, I think in the sloped roof, if you noticed, it wasn't a continuous sloped roof all the way.
Right.
So it's really a structured roof that would go back to the flat membrane. So most of that roof is going to be a similar roof structure. So in terms of maintenance or costs, it would be very similar. I think the only thing I would say, and obviously Nicole representing the cost and construction, the structured roof, because there's a little bit more structure involved in getting that extra capacity and volume, there might be a little bit more cost with that part of it. And you're probably mixing two systems too, because the structured part that you see elevated would either be shingles or standing seam metal roof, and then you would have a membrane roof for the other part, whereas the other system would be a little bit more simplified.
Okay, thank you. Yep. And flat roof for me.
Anyone else going to voice their preference? We should all be voicing our preferences. Rich?
Yeah, I've got some comments. First of all, on slide number 10, I like the prairie style elements here, the sweeping horizontal lines. The large cantilever evokes McCormick Place to me, which is, a lot of people head downtown, and that's a major iconic building as part of Chicago. I definitely like the columns. I think they add wonderful three-dimensional features and articulation. On slide 12, I like the double horizontal limestone banding that's evocative of the Main Street train station, which is, you can see that from here. So I believe the architects did a good job in picking up on that. I do like the overhang. I think it provides a nice vertical break. We're across from a residential area, so I think we have to be mindful of the height. So definitely love the columns in this thing. Unfortunately, particularly on slide 16, it looks like a prison to me. So sorry to the architect who threw that in there. But that was honestly.
Prisons need architects too, Rich.
I know. There's an awful number. Or architects need prisons. So those are my feelings about that.
Thanks, Rich. Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really glad someone on slide 10 said that, mentioned the entrance to the lobby, because as someone with no architectural background, I was going to describe those as the two chunks of the front, but instead I will say the entrance to the lobby and then what mirrors the entrance to the lobby rather than two chunks. I agree with everything my colleagues have said thus far. What I want to add is what really drew me to the flat roof, amongst other things, was it appears that there's more windows, which would allow more light than if you were to look at the sloped roof option. So I appreciate more of the windows to give it less, Commissioner Colavani, of a prison feel. Obviously more light, enhances moods and just brightens the entire building as a whole. So I appreciated that about the flat roof option. Thank you.
That part about the prison, that won't be in the minutes, won't it?
Danny, you got any thoughts?
I agree with what's been said already. I like the flat roof option. I think it aligns with all the desired attributes that we had gone over previously. I think it is going to be more timeless, going to look like it's been around for a while still, but I think this is more, gives it a more updated feel, and it blends in with the rest of the downtown area as well. So Yeah, I'm in favor of the flat roof as well at this point.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I, at the risk of being repetitive, agree. I think the flat roof style by a long shot, or a long mile for me. I love the pillars. I can envision us thinking of each of those pillars as members of our historical community, and maybe even some dedication to those, so we can think about that as we look forward. But to me, it's the perfect mix of what I think is a classical look with some just modern flair, for lack of a better word. So to me, I think it's great. I had the similar question about the maintenance on the roof or efficiency there, and it sounds like those are considered. So yeah, I'm in full agreement on the flat style roof.
Okay, I agree. Mike,
All
we'll
right.
move on?
Okay, certainly.
I think you have a question from the
Oh,
audience.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Come up to the mic, Jim. Come up to the mic so we can all hear you.
One of the things, I love this look, but I spend a lot of time downtown, and I know a couple of developers, and since I apologize for being late, but the really cool thing, and I see downtown, and this is a question I have, and I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, but is there any contingency of having a green roof for this section of the green? Because I spend a lot of time at the Hyatt, a couple of hotels, because I'm getting into advertising with them and stuff. And the Mercedes dealership in one of the locations has a section, like the one corner there, and they got the plants and stuff. And the beautiful flowers, the fairy plants and stuff. I could see, wow. It's because you have taller buildings than in your area. So I mean, just the aspect of the prairie plants. So I think they call it green roof. And they said that, and then now they modernized it probably within the last 6 years. They actually they officially proved if you go with the green roof that it actually saves maintenance of the roof. The way they process it, it's a little bit more costly. But on the long run, it saves the maintenance, the environment. It would be like top of the cake.
Sure. Well, you've perfectly teed up the next topic of discussion, because we're about to move into the environmental attributes of the building, and you've identified one of them.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone, yeah, please, come on down to this podium.
It's hard to tell, but over the doorways, is there going to be like a portico over the door, directly over the doorway?
Go to the microphone, and partly the reason for that, guys, let me just make clear, is that the folks watching at home
Oh, okay.
want to be able to hear both sides of the conversation, so.
It's hard to tell, but over the doorways, directly above the
Yep.
doorway, is there like a portico?
I believe so. You can kind of here you can see it a little more
Okay,
clearly.
because I know like in some of these buildings, newer buildings, it's like hard to see the doorway.
Yes.
And so it helps to have something over, plus if it's raining or whatever, you have someplace to stop real quick.
Yep.
So, okay, I just wanted to
Yep.
clarify that.
And the
Okay.
one thing that's really not being shown on these, given how sort of early these images are, would be the signage that would also
Right.
help to clarify where customers of various services will need to go and
Right.
make sure they get directed to the right spot.
Okay, thank you.
The signage will help define the chunks.
Yes. That's exactly what I was about to say.
Anyone else from the audience want to make a comment or ask a question concerning these elevations?
I apologize if this was already discussed, but the overhang on the flat roof, is that designed to accommodate deflecting the sun in summer and allowing the sun to shine into the south-facing? Yes?
Yes, I believe, I'm getting a head nod from the architect, so I believe it is not just an aesthetic, but also an environmentally sustainable feature as well.
Is it a solid roof or?
I believe there are some,
Yet to be determined. There might be a trellis at the outer tip to reduce some of the weight there. But we will fully study the solar, passive solar.
And so that answer for folks at home, the answer to that question was it's not fully designed, but there would be, first of all, consideration of that, and there may be some trellis aspect of those overhangs to try and work on minimizing weight, but still managing some of the solar impact on the building. Mike, over to you.
All right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez.
It's okay, Mayor. I have one more
You can't
comment.
ask me more
Okay. All right. One more quick question.
No, I'm
Really?
sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's okay. It's fine. It's actually just more of a request that I wanted to, I think I would be remiss if I didn't say again. If we look at number 12, slide 12,
These numbers will-
since we have the architects in the room, this is the view from the train. And I think it's extremely important to me that, and I hope all of us here, that the view from the building has some substance from that view, since there's going to be thousands and thousands of people passing by Downers Grove. It will be our representative flagship building, and I think that's where the view is going to be most seen from. So whatever we can do, I understand that's sort of the back of the building, and there's some restrictions with parking and the police vehicles and all that. Just whatever we can do to look at that and think of that as almost like the front door to a lot of people who are passing through.
Yes. Thank you. You'll be happy to know we absolutely talked about that, and we know there's a lot of viewers of this building that will never step foot inside
Right.
it, and how still important that is of your image.
It
So
represents us, yeah.
Thank you for that
Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to avoid getting ahead of myself again. Anyone else want to talk more about the elevations and the renderings? All right. Now I'll put it back to Mike.
All right, so we'll move on to the environmental attributes of the project. Again, I will provide a presentation of this information at a summary level. At the end, as we have any questions or comments, we'll get assistance from the team to make sure we cover areas of technical expertise. As we're discussing the environmental attributes of the building, it is important to understand that there are a significant number that are already included in the baseline project budget and scope. So just as a result of code requirements and other factors that are already sort of built into what's going to be built before there's discussion of any enhancements, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. In a minute, I'll show you a pretty extensive list of those features. In addition, what you will also see are recommended packages for allocating $2.6 million of environmentally sustainable enhancements to the building design and construction. These were prepared in consultation with the architect and construction management firm as what we believe are most desirable in terms of attributes that would provide for $2.6 million further as it relates to environmental enhancements. So I wanted to start out by showing the summary of the preliminary project budget. This was prepared and presented when the FY22 budget was released at the end of October 2021. And I'll draw your attention not only to the environmentally sustainable enhancement line item, so there's that $2.6 million that you see right here, but right above it, the line items for building and site construction. Again, those figures represent, and many of the features that are constructed just within those line items will also hit on sustainable enhancements to the building. Here is that list, again, the environmental attributes in the baseline budget and scope. Some of them expressed quantitatively, many of them qualitatively. I'm not going to read through every single one of them. If people have questions or want to delve further, we can certainly do so. But again, these touch on areas of the building itself, of the site, and attempt to demonstrate a manner in which the new facility will be much more energy efficient, consume less water, just provide a significant number of benefits. And again, this is before any of the environmental enhancements, the $2.6 million, are even applied. The table you're seeing here represents a summary comparison of the existing buildings, the existing Village Hall building that we're in now, an existing police station, in terms of energy cost and consumption compared with the new combined facility. This information was prepared. We provided the energy usage bills and statements to the architects who worked with the engineering consultants to analyze and prepare this information that shows that the existing Village Hall building, again, is significantly more energy inefficient compared to what is recommended in the new combined facility, with energy costs being reduced by 32%, the energy use intensity being reduced by over 50%. This is also a meaningful comparison because the buildings are roughly the same size, the combined size of the police station and Village Hall compared to the square footage of the new facility. And that's a factor that's weighed in that calculation. And then carbon dioxide reduction as well, reduced by 37%. Again, this relates to the, should have pointed out, the mechanical systems that'll be incorporated into the new building compared to the systems and the energy required to operate those systems in these existing buildings. All right, now here are the comparison of the recommendations for the allocation of the $2.6 million of environmental enhancements. And the columns show what is recommended for the flat roof building option and what is recommended for the sloped roof building option. Since council members clearly expressed preference for the flat roof, I'll focus on that one and really draw your attention to the fact that the difference appears in just two of the lines. The permeable pavers, there's a lower cost in the flat roof option, where only, about 20% of the parking areas are covered with permeable pavers. And there's a higher cost for photovoltaic panels. And it was alluded to by Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. The flat roof obviously has a greater capacity to accept more PV panels as compared to the slope roof option. In addition to that, these recommended enhancements include an enhancement to make the HVAC system function more efficiently, enhancements to the exterior building envelope of $900,000 to improve insulation and better temperature control. The green roof, there you are, Mr. Kelly, that would install a green roof on 10% of the roof areas.
Can we move that up to like 20%?
We'll talk about that in just a good anticipation. You must have been reading ahead. The permeable pavers, as I just mentioned, covering 20% of the parking areas on the flat roof option. The PV or solar panels that would offset about 5 to 10% of the electrical load on the flat roof option. Bioswales and rain gardens covering 50% of the landscaped areas. And then rain harvesting for irrigation system, where the rainwater coming off the roof of the building would be captured in a cistern and used to irrigate landscaping around the site. So again, all these items you can see here in focusing on that flat roof option, totaling $2.6 million. Now there are certainly the ability to go beyond the set of enhancements that was presented just a minute ago, and that's what's shown on the slide, this slide here, where there are further enhancements that could be made to the mechanical or HVAC systems that include a hybrid geothermal system. It has an additional cost, so this is a net increase to the figures that were shown previously, but an additional cost of $2.5 million. The entire parking area could be made covered with permeable pavers for an additional $975,000. Photovoltaic panels could be expanded in other areas, and this would essentially require the installation of carports in parking lots that would have the panels above those carports. $775,000 of additional cost. Achieving an 80% of the landscaped areas with bioswales and rain gardens would cost an additional $150,000. And some enhancements for rainwater harvesting that would include the installation of 2 cisterns, one for irrigation and one for gray water. I believe those costs, $400,000, would also include the necessary plumbing and requirements to support a gray water system, given the codes, plumbing codes. So just for the flat roof option, that list of additional enhancements could total $4.8 million more beyond the 2.6 that was presented previously. And as we're wrapping up, as the team has looked at and studied options for environmental sustainability, there are 3 areas that are determined to be not practical or feasible. One of those is the installation of a complete geothermal system. What really inhibits us here is the construction phasing of the project and the fact that we will be continuing to occupy this building and the police station while the new facility is constructed, and therefore we wouldn't have access to a full geothermal field if it were construction on a green site or open construction site where the project could be constructed in one phase. The use of wind energy was also determined not to be feasible. And upon study and investigation, the construction of a facility that would be a net zero energy building at the time of construction was also determined not to be practical or feasible. This is not to say that the building could not be constructed in such a way that over time and eventually it would achieve a net zero energy status. All right. I will, actually, why don't we pause right here, and I will ask if there are any questions or comments from members of the council. And again, our team may assist with answers to those questions.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody want to jump in on this subject? Leslie, go ahead. Start us off
jump in
again.
on this subject.
Start us off again.
I personally would be in favor of doing all of the additional environmental attributes. To me, this is a very large project, and this is going to be a building that we are going to be using for, let's hope, decades. And to me, there is no reason that we should not be considering everything that we have available to us, given the size of the project. Especially, I really want to point out both the permeable pavers, the bioswales, and the rainwater harvesting for gray water. Knowing what we know about this area, the flooding issues, St. Joseph's Creek, to me, we would be doing a huge disservice to the community if we did not do everything that we can to recapture water and minimize our stormwater impact. So to me, those should be non-negotiable, knowing the issues that we have. I also would suggest that, for that cost, I think we should be trying to offset our electrical load with renewable energies for basically as much as we can. I can understand that the hybrid geothermal system is a really big dollar amount, whereas the other ones seem a little smaller. That's one that I'd be willing to have more conversations about, but to me, the permeable pavers, the solar, the bioswales, and the rainwater harvesting for irrigation systems, for me, are no-brainers that I think we should add on to this. One question I do have is around the hybrid geothermal system, kind of how, I don't know enough about a hybrid geothermal system, so kind of, I guess what I'm asking for is, what's the bang for your buck? That's obviously the biggest cost line item. Is that going to also provide, a relative greater reduction in fossil fuels, CO2 emissions, all that?
Thank you. Dave Yandel with FTM Architects. Excellent question. And the summary that Mike's provided here, again, you can only imagine the numerous options and trying to find a perfect balance here. Yeah. The biggest challenges with geothermal, as Mike indicated, is the size of the site and the phasing in order to get the wells in place. So what we were studying more detailed was a hybrid solution. A traditional hybrid solution is usually about 50-50. based on the area that we've got available, which is really kind of the middle north portion of the parking lot that's not going to be touched in between the orange and the yellow, which is about 25,000 square feet. I know I'm getting too deep in the weeds, but that ends up more like a 40-60, 40% geothermal, 60%. So that helps minimize, but not significantly, the 33% and kind of the CO2 reductions of 30+%. They might go to like a couple percentage points better, but the cost offset, the $2.5 million, is for the cost of the wells themselves, and then you're kind of running redundant systems. We're still going to need the same VAV system that we have as a baseline mechanical system, but then you've got the secondary system, kind of the heat pump, that helps support the heating and cooling loads, and they end up fighting for real estate inside the building, so the building grows a little bit bigger as well. So there's a square footage cost add to the building.
Got it.
So from a energy saving standpoint, those couple points above where we're at with the recommended system for the $2.5 to $1 million just didn't seem valuable,
Got it.
but we didn't want to take it off the
Sure.
table.
Kind of a follow-up question. I mean, there's probably no benefit going forward, right? Because we're still not going to have the space once we sell off that land anyway.
Correct.
So eventually, we would never be able to kind of shift more towards that, like a full geothermal anyway, given the space constraints that we have.
You come back and drill more holes in the parking lots, and you probably would
Sure.
never get to 100%.
Yeah.
You might tweak that more to an 80-20
Okay.
at the high end, but I don't think we'd ever get to a complete
Sure.
geothermal system where that is your
Yeah.
only source of heating and cooling. And so what the geothermal does is a heat pump, instead of having a boiler for heat for hot water and a chiller for chilled water, the heat pump does the heavy lifting for
Yeah.
all of that.
Thank you.
And then just because you mentioned the other stormwater attributes, finding that balancing act, there's kind of two things that we're trying to balance. On the roof, to the point before, real estate is key, so we're trying to find the right balance of space for PVs
Yeah.
and then space for green roof, which helps not only with stormwater runoff, roofing maintenance, and the green or the heat island effect, which
Right.
the white roof or the reflective roof surface will do as well. But you can see the main roof is the largest area. We've got several other low roof areas where we think the green roof might be able to be a feature, because you run into other issues about these sustainable attributes fighting for rainwater.
Right.
You also want the rainwater to fill the cisterns for the system, and also want it to feed the rain gardens and bioswales.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find that balance of feeding it all. Rainwater is unpredictable.
Yep.
As much as when it comes, right? So what was recommended was kind of a nice balancing act. And even if you said, please pursue studying these details further, we're still going to probably come back to you with a balanced approach
sure.
that best suits all of those systems, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay, anyone else want to jump in? We'll just go down the line. Rich, want to go down this way, come back this way?
Yep.
Let's start there.
All right,
No.
go ahead, Chris.
All right, I'll go. So the percentages of energy cost, so the first question was, can you tell me what is energy use intensity?
It's fairly straightforward math. It's the BTUs per square foot per year. So it's the BTUs used divided purely by the square footage of the building. It's a relatively newer criteria that's being used. It's relevant because the two buildings that we're replacing, it was relevant in this discussion because the two buildings that we're replacing are very similar in their size, as Mike mentioned, as well as their function. If you were to say, hey, my building's got a 67 EIU, you're not going to really take that out on the streets, because a spec office building that's 77,000 square feet that only operates from 8 to 6 each day might have a lower EIU just because they're not a 24/7 facility like police.
Got
But
it.
it was important for the comparison here as we looked at different systems. This is kind of the recommended system we had, but as we've studied other systems at this very early stage of design, it was one of the criteria that helped rate.
Yeah. Okay, it's new, that's probably why I don't know what it is. Just kidding. I thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Up until 2 months ago, I didn't know what it was either.
So my second question is just, given that it's a 42-plus-year-old building and a 90-year-old building, and we're talking about percentages of savings that are 32% and 37%, help me understand, this is a question not loaded, but help me understand why it isn't more. If we're replacing a 90-year-old building, what am I missing that these aren't closer to 50 and 60 and 70, given the technologies and the environmental sustainability that we can build now that we couldn't 40 and 90 years ago?
That's a good question. I think, for these systems, this is very high.
Okay.
Energy codes have been getting stricter and stricter over the last 15 years and keep pushing the levels. And for comparison, the baseline code system at its current level, the International Energy Conservation Code, IECC, the baseline code compared to your current buildings is 28% greater.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is make that even better and better. So actually, you're right. Maybe your gut think, wow, I should be twice as efficient with all this insulation and efficient use of energy, but there is still a cost to electricity and there is still
Sure.
a cost to natural gas, and those factor into the, at least the cost savings, the energy cost savings.
One factor that might contribute, and we'd be happy to study this with the architects to understand, we did replace the boilers in this building 2 years ago because they were at catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
And we had to replace them before we went into the winter months.
So there was some efficiency already realized.
I believe the energy
the baseline
consumption information that we provided incorporated some of that efficiency gain from those newer boiler systems. But we can
we used the last 2 years of
we
records
gave them.
to
We can verify that.
Okay, yeah, so it's just helpful to know just what we're getting for all this, and to Commissioner Sadusky, if you just point, are the additional environmental things, which I also like a lot of as well, where are the gains? And you talked about the balance, but if 32% energy cost and 37% CO2 costs are above baseline or above expected, I would just like to know, how much above, and sort of, so we can look and see what we're actually gaining. I know we have to use energy, but just to the point of trying to figure out how much are these additional environmental attributes, helping us save in these energy costs.
Sure. We'll make sure that staff has the full kind of support that backs up the summary above.
Thank you. And the tanning beds are out, right? Tanning beds are out. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Rich?
Yeah, a few comments. First of all, an editorial comment. I learned today that this building was actually built in 1915. It was originally Potter Manufacturing, and they manufactured chicken coops that they shipped all over the country. And we're trying to figure out when that company, it sold out to another company called Bateman Lumber, who moved out to Westmont. We're trying to figure out when Schaefer Baring bought it, because I know that's who we took it over for. But those are side issues. To me, the $2.5 million for the hybrid geothermal strikes me as being unreasonable based on the footprint considerations that we have. My question about permeable pavers, they seem to have worked out really well in the parking lot across from North. And from what I understand about our requirement to do on-site detention is related to increase in non-permeable areas, which I think we probably won't see that increase, correct?
That's correct. What we believe, yes.
Okay. So then it really gets a matter of, if we're not going to have to invest money into on-site storage, with the permeable pavers help with our stormwater issue. I wish they weren't so expensive, but I think that might be something to take a look at. What strikes me about the PV panels, my original thought is more is better. I'd like to see some analysis on the break-even point these days, because with a lot of these environmental savings, it's okay, the savings we will flow back to our residents will take X number of years, and then I think that would help this council make a more informed decision based on that. Bioswales, I'm certainly in favor of those. And then, once again, are we competing between stormwater that we have to retain and stormwater that we want the plants in the bioswales to pick up? I guess I'm in favor of the irrigation system. I'm less sure about what we're getting with the gray water and how much our water savings cost would be and what our water consumption would be. So I'm open to looking at investing a little bit more in the total budget. I'm not convinced yet that another $4.8 million is worth the investment.
Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I think, like many of my colleagues, the hybrid geothermal system caught my attention. I appreciated the information on that, that it seems to be, that it's a redundant system, energy savings is a couple points, doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to be totally valuable. So given the cost, that feedback, I think, was really great. So that kind of, my thought really hasn't changed on that I'm not quite sure that would be the best, use of money spent. However, everything else on the additional environmental attributes list, I agree with, I'm fine with, I think it would be beneficial. Like Commissioner Gilmartin, I questioned initially the savings. You look at this and same thing. Totally forgot that we approved that new system a couple years ago because we didn't know when we were going to get a new building, and some of these things just needed to be fixed then. So that makes sense. Do you see the percentage of savings potentially going up from what it's currently estimated at? Should we add some of those additional environmental attributes?
Yes, that's a great point. On the previous slide, we have a budget a very kind of preliminary working budget of $900,000 to increase the exterior envelope and the performance of it. Additional insulation at the roof, at the perimeter walls, other things that will help make the mechanical systems more efficient, as well as some of the other user occupancy attributes, the glare control, sunshades, the right type of glazing that reduces solar heat gain on those south elevations. So it gives us a little room to work as we explore further, the overall building. I can only stress again how early we are in the design phase.
Sure.
The goal here to get direction and study these attributes further, and certainly come back to you guys later with a little bit more detailed information is the primary goal.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, there's this comment about initial occupancy and that there might be a path forward that is improving from that point. Help us understand what that might look like. How does that work?
So preliminary conversations within the design team, that's our mechanical, our MEP consultants and others, see net zero, which is a target that the federal government has set for 2045, to make their portfolio of new buildings net zero. Is very challenging for this project with the technology that we have at hand and the constraints that we've kind of outlined. The site constraints don't allow for some of the, for a geothermal, the size of the building, and without really covering the entire site area with PV, we're limited to how much renewables we can get. And the inherent nature of the building, a police department that's 24/7, 365, uses energy at a much higher rate than a federal office building that's, again, 8 to 5 or 8 to 6. So everything we're doing here, from mechanical systems to the building envelope, are geared towards reducing energy usage and minimizing CO2 emissions to the greatest extent possible. We're considering other strategies with building materials, lumber, sustainable wood products that also help to lower embodied carbons. Are other sustainable attributes that we're going to try to bring not only to the interior of the building, but if feasible to the exterior of the building to help showcase some of the strategies that are happening. So as Mike kind of mentioned, while maybe not on day one you want to invest in carports that may have PVs on the roof, having the infrastructure in place that could be added over time, or if you really wanted to do all permeable up front, or 80% permeable, whatever that right balance number is, and do a lower number of PVs on day one, we want to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to have PVs to the greatest extent possible. So, just shooting straight, I don't know that the building would ever be able to achieve 100% net zero, because that also in the industry requires other offsets, being involved with green energy programs, carbon sinks, other things that don't necessarily happen on your site, but as a commitment by the village to contribute back to other industries. So what we're trying to do is get you as far down the road as we can to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, because we're seeing technology, expand at a, infinite rate. And so the technologies that are here today are only going to improve, 10 years from now as you're halfway towards the 2045 plan. And your building will be 20 years old at, the time that the 2045 plan is really taking root in society.
Okay. I've said, and I continue to think, that we have two obligations. One is to do, the best we can with our building, and that involves, trying to reduce the cost of operations, but we define cost not only as dollars. And I also think we have an obligation to try and model or demonstrate, be an example for what we expect in the balance of the community. So I understand the geothermal challenges. Not a big fan of drilling holes in the parking lot later. But everything else on that list, I think we ought to try and find a way to weave into the project. Those are things that, whether we achieve exactly the description that any one of us has in our head of those 5 or 6 additional things, and whether it costs the exact amount of money, those are the things we should be trying to model and put into the examples that we're setting, I think. And so I'd like to see us pursue the balance of that list other than that geothermal system. So that's my 2 cents. Anybody from the audience want to come and comment on some of the conversation they've listened to about environmental attributes?
There's some local...
Jim.
There's some local environmental companies that are at the upscale. There's one in Hinsdale that basically they pulled away from Exxon, and they've got, wow, they're doing some awesome stuff. And a lot of these companies, the technology is like within what they were talking about 2-3 years ago. They passed that already. And if we could showcase and pull in some of this, brain geniuses with energy, it's really not that hard. I mean, just make sure we search out the best, because they're out there. Some of these, I met this guy in Hinsdale. He works for this energy company, and anything when it comes to energy, it's like some people playing golf, they know everything. And it's amazing. And let's think about something. I'm not looking for futuristics, but let's think about something that we plan something where we're not basically backstepping into something because we passed something else up. Just reach out and ask some of these people, because they're out there. It's amazing. Environmentalists are out there. It's just not taking a flag environmentalist. They're coming up with some solutions, and it's every day comes up with. It's great. But the green, much more green. They made it work. They made it work in the city. A lot of buildings, green roofs, solar panels. Bridgeview Court has in a parking lot energy panels in the parking lot that are attached to help with the energy and the lighting of the parking lot. Anything that we could critique at a lower cost, go for it.
Thanks, Jim.
questions. I don't know if the first question is captured under the hybrid geothermal system, but I'm aware that, at least in a residential building, people sometimes pay attention to the idea of a heat sink. And I don't know if that's done in buildings of this size, and I don't know if the hybrid geothermal system encompasses that concept. Could someone speak to that, first of all?
And that's, yes, in general, that's what the geothermal wells are. You know, they drill holes. Brian, how deep? 600. Yeah. And that's, the deeper you go, because once you get down below, the Earth's temperature stays at like 50 degrees, and so that's 50-degree water that you use for both heating and cooling throughout the building. So you're right, on a residential scale, they can do it, and certainly on a building of this size, it's feasible. The site constraints here are the biggest challenges we have to make it a fully, beneficial system.
And is geothermal the typical preferred approach for a heat sink, or are there others that can be explored?
Well, on a site like this, it's really the only option. The other way that we've seen it done is sometimes in other office parks where they might have a detention pond, you can actually use the surface area of the water, and you don't have to go as deep, and you can just kind of run that piping through the bottom of the pond. But again, it takes real estate that we don't quite have here. That's again, site constraints and the size of the building are really our two biggest challenges.
So the idea is that the water is the sink as opposed to something else.
Correct.
The second question concerns the lifespan of the photovoltaic panels. Can someone speak to that?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Culvini asked for that. I suspect we'll get that in the future.
Okay. A third question concerns the possibility of separating out, if that should become a necessity, as opposed to something that I hear people here saying, we'd like to do it all, but if for some reason it couldn't happen in one fell swoop, how separable are these things?
Okay. None of them are, what we're trying to do is, as we mentioned, we're very, very early in design and trying to give additional direction about the intentions and the aspirations of the council, and I think that's what we've done there. None of them are necessarily linked or necessarily separable at this point.
Okay. Can we flash back through the different, just as a reminder to me of
The different, which,
what was the slide before this one? Was that relevant?
so this is the breakdown of what's recommended
Okay, what's the
within the
one after?
$2.6 million of enhancements.
Go to the one after this. Okay, and then the next one. Okay, and I think someone's already asked about the net zero upon initial occupancy versus later. Okay. And
Any other comments from council? Questions from council? Okay. We'll continue. Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
And nice
Mayor, if I
job.
could wrap up, I think we heard direction from council to pursue consideration of some of these additional enhancements. I would like to make the council aware, if I go back to the slide that I had up earlier that showed so here's the total project budget breakdown. This was prepared by Leopardo back in September of 2021, so a very preliminary budgetary breakdown, but it has the $2.6 million of enhancements. To the extent that we exceed that $2.6 million, it may require us to go back and relook at the financial plan that supports the way that we cover the costs of this project. So we understand what the council is asking us to do, and we will go through that exercise. I'll also let council know that as we wrap up the schematic design phase of the project, that schematic design package will be taken by Leopardo, and they'll be updating cost estimates. That will occur during the month of February. So we'll have also updated cost estimate information to go about making these decisions.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Does that wrap up manager's report, Mike?
I believe so. Yes, nothing further under manager's report, Mayor.
Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Only 2 items tonight. The first is an ordinance amending certain traffic control provisions at Prairie and Forest, and the other is an ordinance calling for a public hearing and a joint review board meeting to consider the designation of the Washington and Curtis Street tax increment redevelopment area. Both will be on next week's active agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Enzo. Item 12, council member reports. Portion of the meeting for council members to report out on goings-on in the community, other entities, organizations they're part of, working with. Danny, what do you got?
No report, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chris.
No report tonight, thank you.
Rich.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Nicole.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
No reports.
Right?
Wow. All right. All right. Well, then I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all and good night.